So, did you know there are unasked questions at IEP meetings that could make a real difference for your child's education? And yes, I know you know how to ask for a strength based IEP. You know questions to ask to make sure that your child has meaningful and measurable goals. You know how to ask questions about how do I get more specific information for my child's progress on these reports. You also know you don't want vague, um, not understood accommodations. You know how to ask questions to make sure that your child is getting push in services. However, you probably don't know about these 10 questions I think often go unasked at IEP meetings. So stay tuned because that's what we're going to be talking about today. So, we have a great show for you today, whether you are watching live or on the replay, because we want to make sure that we are really specific about the types of questions we ask and when we ask them during the IEP meeting. So, that is our show for what we'll be doing today. And if you know me, you know that I love when you write comments and questions in the chat. And if you don't know me, I'm Charmaine Thaner. I'm a parent of an adult son with Down syndrome, Dylan. I've been a special ed teacher, a classroom teacher. I retired from teaching and became an advocate for parents and kiddos. So we are here on 2 Thursdays a month. So I'm glad you're here with us today. Let's get into what we want to talk about, right? So, actually, what we really want to talk about first is what I want you to stop doing. So, I want you to stop assuming that everyone is interpreting what is written in the IEP in the same way. Because that just doesn't happen, does it? And I also know from talking with parents that you can often get that kind of, I don't know what I don't know feeling, right? And it's like, shoot, I don't know. How do I figure this out? And I want you to give yourself grace because this special ed journey is a journey. And every year you're going to be learning a little bit more about how to be that effective advocate for your child. So give yourself grace. It's okay. And that's what we're here for, right? We're here to help you learn some new things. So when parents call me and they're like so like ready for somebody else to be at the table with them and they're interested in hiring an advocate, what I hear so much from parents is that feeling of being overwhelmed. So can you identify with that? It's just like, there's more things I have to do. I just already feel like I'm doing enough. And also, you might feel intimidated when you're in that IEP meeting and you have, like 12 pairs of eyes staring at you. Or the other thing that I hear often from parents is just being so effing exhausted. It's like, exhausted, right? And then you put on top of that all of these acronyms that we say in special ed lingo when we're at meetings. So, do you have a favorite acronym that you don't see here? Type it in the comments. I think that would be fun to see. Or do you see an acronym here that you're like, I really don't know what TVI means. You can ask that in the comments too. Um, yeah, so there's a lot that parents have to keep in mind, and we're here to try and help you do that and kind of simplify things. Um, you may have noticed I have some new attire on today. I have been known as the queen of many things. Some we probably can't talk about right now. However, I'm also known as the queen of details. And I also have to remind myself that we have to look at the big picture. So, today, some of the questions we are going to want you to ask during meetings is a big question, a big, like, big picture vision kind of question. And some of the questions, probably more of the questions today that we'll talk about, are those little details, right? What is that saying? The devil's in the details. So, really, looking at the details in your IEP is going to be where you'll have some kind of surprising moments, I believe. So, let's go back over here and see. Our first question is, what's the purpose of this meeting? And actually, you want to say this before you get to the meeting. What's the purpose of this meeting? And you might think, I don't know, Charmaine, this is kind of ridiculous. It's our, it's an IEP meeting. What do you mean? What's the purpose of the meeting? However, I do have parents that, assume the meeting is going to be talking about, I don't know, like, the child's progress this past quarter. And the team is thinking, oh no, this is just like an informal kind of parent teacher conference kind of conversation. So when you get the invitation to the IEP meeting, you need to look at it, and there should be a box checked as far as what the purpose of the meeting is. If they checked a box that says something you don't think is the purpose of the meeting, that's your first question to follow up with, because you all want to be on the same page that, yes, we're coming together for an evaluation meeting, or we're coming together for an IEP meeting, and the purpose is to renew or review or whatever. So make sure you know the purpose of the meeting. And then the other thing that you want to make sure that you're asking is, does this IEP describe the child that you know? Because hopefully you're giving input into what is going to go into the draft language, right? We used to say, back in the old days of advocacy, we used to say, ask for a copy of the draft so many days ahead of time. And now we know that we really, as parents, want to give our input before the draft is even made or written. But when you read that draft, does it really, like, you could really say, this describes my kid, this is who he is, or this is what she is like? Or is it an IEP that just feels like it's another generic kind of document that doesn't really mean much? How many of your child's strengths and interests are in the IEP? Do you really have meaningful goals? Are the accommodations really something that your child likes using as a way of learning? Does it talk about your whole child? Does it talk about what they love to do on the weekends? So, to me, an important question that gets unasked is, does this IEP describe who I see my child as? So, keep your questions and comments coming so we can be interactive. We're going to go through a few more questions, and then we have some exciting details to talk about. Another question is, what progress did my child make on his previous goals? So, especially if you're at an IEP meeting for an annual review and they start talking about the strengths, the needs, the baseline, the new goal. I mean, so many times I just like say, stop. Can we go back and make sure it's written in the IEP what my child's progress was on his previous goals? And they might say, well, that kind of information is in the progress report, but sometimes the progress report isn't that clear, right? So instead, I think it's really helpful if you specifically ask that progress on their previous goals be written right there in the IEP in the present level of performance section, because when people pick up the IEP, they're not going to go, oh, let me go read the last progress report. No, we all want it in one place. And to me, that's part of present level, right? This is the progress they made on this reading goal that we've been working on this year. Now, this is the new goal we want, but I want to know what that progress was. So that's your third question you want to make sure you're asking at IEP meetings. The other one is, are these meaningful goals for my child? I think a lot of times when we look at SMART goals, and I actually have a video about why SMART goals aren't SMART goals. Let me know if you want that. I can give you the link. I think when we look at SMART goals, we think of the M standing for measurable. And I want a double M. M&M, yes. I want meaningful goals that are measurable. And that's something that, I think we don't stop and think about enough is, yes, there's a developmental sequence of things that your child's going to be learning, but how can we pull in your child's interests, embed those in the goals, so they're really something that's going to be meaningful for your child, and they want to learn how to do that or want to learn to work on that, right? So, do you think you have meaningful goals in your child's AEP? I'm going to stop for a sip of water and look at your questions. Roseanne says, yes, the link to the SMART goals aren't so smart. Okay, I'll come back this afternoon or maybe this evening. I don't know. I've got meetings. However, I will come back today and give you that link. It was a video that I've done. It's on my YouTube channel. It'll be easier if I just give you the link. Hey, Kim from Iowa. Kim is in our Connecting for Change group and is a change maker. So welcome. Let's go back and look at another question we can be asking. Okay, this is the one that really gets into details. As an advocate, I really look at how connected the baseline data is to the annual goals. And even before that, is there a connection between the needs that are identified in your child's IEP? Is that connected to the baseline data? Is that connected to the annual goal? So I'm going to give you some examples, and make sure if you have questions about them, ask, because I want to make sure this is understandable. Well, first, and I don't know why I made this state so huge. So I work in different states, and in one state, and it's a geography question. Can you guess what the state is? In one state, well, different states have different IEP forms. In one state I was helping a family with, they had no box that said baseline data. So they didn't put in what I consider baseline data. Instead, in the present levels, they kind of had some little things there, but it really wasn't baseline data. It was more like strengths and that kind of thing. So I was in Illinois, if you don't know that state. I was in Illinois, and there was nothing baseline as far as what the child's, present could do now compared to the goal. So I asked the special ed teacher, I said, well, what is the baseline as far as for his reading skills? And the special ed teacher paused for a second, and she said, well, he's pretty good. And she's nodding her head. Yeah, his reading is pretty good. And I did have to take a deep breath, because it's like, no, pretty good is not what we want to see for baseline data. So let's look at a couple of examples here, and we will talk about how they need to be connected. So the needs to be connected to the baseline. We could do that song. What is it? Ankle bones connected to the blah, blah. And the baseline is connected to the goal. That's the ultimate goal, is these things are connected in your child's IEP. So here's an example. Jason needs to improve his expressive language skills so he can communicate more with his classmates in the general education classroom. Okay, so that's a need. Now we're going to look at the baseline that was written for Jason. Given verbal prompts in 3 picture sequence cards, Jason can currently correctly sequence a 3-step picture sequence with 30% accuracy. So I ask you, does the need connect with the baseline data? And type in your answer. Hey, Susanna is here from New York. I love when we have East Coast people. So what do you think? Does that need connect with the baseline data? Expressive language, 3-picture sequence. No. No. Yes, Roseanne, Kimberly, you got it. And this, of course, the names are changed, some of the language a little bit changed. However, this is really from an IEP that I read. And it was like, okay, so I read the need, and it's like, okay, so now I'm going to look for some baseline about his expressive language skills. No. Then I read baseline about 3, and it wasn't like that was like in the wrong place. I don't know what the deal was, but these are the details that you have to look for, I think, or pay an advocate to look for them for you. So let's go to a different example. Marissa needs to keep building her number sense and understanding of what greater than, less than, and equal to mean. Okay, so that's a math need. And now I look at the baseline. Given 2 groups of math manipulatives, Marissa can identify the group that is greater than the other, less than, and equal to the other with 50% accuracy. So, does the need connect with the baseline? What do you think? Let me know. So, greater than, less than. What do you think? Let's see. The magic answer is yes. And, which means I have more questions. I have follow-up questions that you can ask. So if I read this, which I did on an IEP, these would be some of the questions that I would ask about the baseline data. So as I'm giving you my thoughts, can you give me your thoughts? if you saw this, given two groups of math manipulatives, Marissa can identify the group that is greater than the other, less than, and equal to the other with 50% accuracy. So if you saw that, what questions might you have? So this is what she can do currently. These are some questions I was thinking of, is how many manipulatives were in each group? So like it was, did they start out like really obvious? Like, this group had 20 and this group had 3. So the student could really tell the difference. So to me, like one of the variables is how many manipulatives were in each group when they tested this for the baseline data. Was she asked all 3 questions for each of the 2 groups? So, when they had 2 groups of the manipulatives, did they ask her which one, I don't know how they phrased it, is greater than the other? Did they ask which one is less than the other? Did they ask, are these groups equal to the other? Because I've got several things in this one baseline. So I'm trying to figure out, like, is she 50% accurate on all of these or some of these? The other thing that I try to figure out with baseline data is how many trials were given when collecting the baseline data. Because if you look at the goal will usually say something like, 4 out of 5 times, or, 3 out of 5 or whatever. So if our goal is based on 4 out of 5 times she can do this, when you collected the baseline data, this would be a question for the teacher, were you able to give her 5 trials with this? And is her baseline data based on 5 trials? This is what she did. So do you see why I'm the queen of details? And, like, the other thing that I have to be honest with you is, the reality is you have to prioritize what's going to be most important for you to talk about at the meeting. However, for me, measuring goals is like one of the big things that we want to make sure happens, and that everybody knows exactly, what the goal means and all of this. And to make sure that that baseline data is also connected to the goal. So stay with me, hang with me. Does this make sense? Let's go back and look at another question. And I think I asked this before. Was she 50% accurate on each one of those things? Or were they all averaged together? So you first want to make sure the baseline data questions are answered before you move on to the goals. Because if you don't have really good information about where you're starting from, the starting point, which is what your baseline should tell you, like for this skill, this is your child's starting point. If you don't have that well defined, it's really going to be hard then to have a goal that's written that's going to be appropriate. So am I convincing you yet to do all this? So we'll take another look at somebody else. Todd, he needs to increase his sight word vocabulary. Given a total of 12 high-frequency words paired with a visual representation and a choice between 2 words in print, Todd currently chooses the correct printed word using one of the following: verbal response, tap, laser pointer, with more than 4 verbal prompts with 25% accuracy. So the need is to increase his sight vocabulary. The baseline is about 12 high frequency words. Is there a connection between the need and the baseline? What do you think? Is there? Huh. I would say yes, those are connected. So now we can move on to looking at the goal. So his goal is pretty much the same wording as a baseline. So I'm not going to go through all of that. The difference was that he would be able to identify those frequent words with no more than 2 verbal prompts with 75% accuracy. So again, does the baseline connect to the goal? Yes, 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 yes. That's what we like to see, right? So let's go away from the minute details of baseline data. And we're going to go back to some other of the top 10 questions you want to make sure you're asking at IEP meetings. And so this one I see so often when kids have reading comprehension goals, and they'll say so and so will answer comprehension questions after reading a short passage. That's not a measurable goal, but that's what you see, right? And so one of my first questions is, are they answering literal or inferential questions? Literal comprehension questions are those ones that you could just like find the answer right there in the book, like what color was the cat, or where did the dog go. That's probably not a good inferential, or that would be more inferential. So literal, you can find the answer right there. Inferential, you have to kind of read between the lines. So when they say, I want this child to be answering comprehension questions, I want to know, are we still at that literal level, or we're talking more inferential type questions? The other thing is, how many questions are they going to be asked? So again, just think of me as the queen of details. Brought to you by the queen of details. The other question that I like to ask about reading comprehension goals is, are the questions being asked multiple choice? And you will be surprised how often you will hear yes, they're asked multiple choice questions. And that might be totally appropriate for your child. However, that little detail is important because I don't know, I guess this is a judgment I would make. If a child is only answering multiple choice questions, there's still that, degree of, did they get it just because they guessed right? And like I said, multiple choice may work for your child, and that's fine. But if you want your child expressing a short answer or something like that, you don't necessarily want them only, asking multiple choice comprehension questions. Hey, Allison. Allison's here from California. Yes. Thank you. She said, no, your IEP team might call a literal question explicit. So watch for and clarify that wording. Yeah, and that's a great point, Allison. And it's almost like we need our own little dictionary, right? That we can like quickly learn. But I mean, the thing is if you don't understand that, ask what that means, right? I mean, I know sometimes it can feel like, oh, I'm going to be embarrassed because I don't know what an explicit question is. And you need to get over that because your child is depending on you to ask questions when somebody says something that doesn't make sense or you don't know. Okie dokie. So another question is, are any of these services/supports provided concurrently, which means together, right? So, and this is a tip I learned from a parent I was working with. So I love it as an advocate. I can always be learning more. Um, and so when we're, like when you're looking at the service grid in the IEP, and it's a table grid, and it will say, readings, I don't know, reading services in the special ed room by the special ed teacher, so many minutes, blah, blah, written language services, special ed room, teacher, blah, so many minutes. So when I look at the table, I used to just assume that he got X amount, 20 minutes a day of reading services, which isn't enough. 20 minutes a day of written language services, which isn't enough. And I thought, some of this time was for reading, some of this time was for written language. But no, the special ed teacher was saying, no, it's a 20-minute block, and we do both reading and written language. Well, that makes a huge difference. I mean, if you think your child is getting a certain amount of minutes for reading, and then at another time, certain amount of minutes for specially designed instruction for written language, like that makes sense to me. And it makes sense that we could combine them. However, if we're combining them, then I want to make sure that time period is going to be enough. If they say they're combining reading and written language into a 20-minute block, it's like, no. So those are the details to look at and to wonder about. Are any of these services concurrent? And that's the question that I've started asking at IEP meetings. So I hope this is something that will help you too, because there's another detailed question that you can ask, and that is when you read in the IEP and they say, increase expressive communication skills with peers. That's not a measurable goal, but let's just pretend like it is. And they talk about peers. My definition of peers is neurotypical kids in a general ed classroom. Your definition of peers might be, I want my child to have some of that affinity time with other autistic kids. Those are his peers, autistic kids. So we need to make sure the word like peers and classmates are defined, because I'm going to have one picture in my mind, and I bet other people sitting around the IEP table have other pictures in their mind. So ask how the staff is defining the word peers or defining the word classmates. And the final question that needs to be asked at every IEP meeting. We need a drum roll. I want you to do it at your house. Do a drum roll for me. And I'm trying to see where my cursor is. So the one question that really we have to ask at every single IEP meeting. Is this IEP going to bring my child one step closer to the future we envision? Because I think as parents, we realize, the importance of looking long term for our children. I think many educators look at IEPs as this document for this year. And we can't look at that. that way as parents. We have to look at this document. This document needs to be leading to what we want for our child, what our child wants for themselves. If this IEP isn't going to do it, we need to go back to the table and talk some more. And I just think that's such a critical distinction, is most of the people sitting around that IEP table are thinking of this is an annual thing. This is a 1-year deal. And it's not a 1-year deal for your child. It's a lifetime deal. And is this the life that you want your child to have? Yes. If you can say yes, then go for it. And you can sign on the dotted line. And if you get that tingling in your gut that, this just doesn't seem right, then you need to act and do something. Right? I mean, it could be joining us. We have a wonderful group called Connecting for Change. If you want to know about that, let me know. It could be coming here on the second and fourth Thursdays to get free training. It could be being active in a Facebook page, like the Facebook page you're seeing this on now. It could be looking at, is there somebody I can hire just to be with me and help me remember the questions that I need to ask? So there's support at all kinds of levels, and you get to decide what support works for you. I just hope that you're not trying to take this journey by yourself. And, one of the reasons that I started an advocacy business was to make sure I could bridge from that education system that I spent 30 years in and the parent life I've spent 36 years in, and bridge those to help people. So I'm excited that you were here today and that you're picking up these tips. And I'm going to go to your questions and comments because I love, oh, look, Kim, I love being part of this group. Oh, thank you. Thank you. And Alice sends also is in our Connecting for Change group. And she says, FYI, don't assume a teacher or service provider is using the latest evidence-based practices to meet a goal. And SLP told me yesterday she would teach inferences by looking for keywords in the text. All the evidence says inferences are also figured out by applying prior knowledge of the social and physical world. That activation of prior knowledge wasn't even in the goal because he doesn't have a lot of knowledge. So I said, well, make the goal process include him. And I'm not sure what he doesn't. Yeah. And Allison, we should, yeah. And Allison is the one that has helped me understand that. And Allison, if you want to put some of this in the comments too, about the connection of reading comprehension and social skills. So if you want to type in, your thoughts about that, Allison, because I think that's an excellent connection. And especially when we're looking at so many different reading comprehension goals being in IEPs. So yeah, that is interesting. Yeah, and Kim was saying interesting. Yeah, because you think of, stories and the characters and what they're going through and description of characters. And it's like, when you have goals for kids, and I'm not necessarily saying these are the best goals, but these are goals that I see a lot. That they'll identify emotions, and when they're reading, if the description of the character's emotions, if they can identify with that, then they lose some of that understanding of the story. And that's my interpretation. I'm probably not giving you Allison's interpretation of the connection. So, Allison, if you want to include that, that would be cool. So, any other questions and comments? Okay. Social competencies around everything are deeply embedded throughout the academic curriculum everywhere. Walking around a classroom without bumping into people, knowing to watch the teacher to know what to do next, understanding why a character is acting the way they are. Yeah. So, and I think that's like an important not necessarily concept, but understanding that we need to bring to, the teachers and the staff that work with your children. So this was our show about the top 10 questions that I don't see being asked very often in IEP meetings, and the questions that you could start asking. So let me know in the comments, was there a particular question that you're like, I want to ask that the next time I'm in an IEP meeting? I'm going to make sure I ask that question. So let me know what your favorite question was from today. And if you're watching the replay, know that you can still make comments and questions, because I'll come back here. And I'll also come back with the link for my video about why SMART goals aren't so smart. I just love that. Anne-Marie from South Carolina. She says, thank you. Will you send these questions in an email? Yes, yes, yes. Good question. Good question. So, and I have where, if you're not on my email list, next Tuesday, you'll get an email if you're on my list, and I'll list the 10 different questions and I'll make it in like a cheat sheet so you can just print it off. So go sign up at iep.today /weekly adv tips. And Anne-Marie, we want to see you in our Connecting for Change group. She is a mover and a shaker in South Carolina. Kimberly says, yeah, multiple choice questions was an interesting point. Yeah, and especially like a lot of schools use Read Naturally. Read Naturally is, you read a passage, they have multiple choice questions. They also have short answer questions on the worksheet. However, what I see is sometimes teachers use the Read Naturally program, and then they only have the kids answer the multiple choice questions. They don't have the kids do the short answer. So, depending on what's appropriate for your child. Yeah, it's it's those assumptions that we make. Oh, they're verbally asking my kid and my kid is verbally answering. It's like, no, not really. So you want to know that, right? Anne-Marie, I miss everyone also. You can come. You can come. You have an open invitation. Everybody does. I heard the teacher say my daughter answers from compliance. I'm not sure if she's comprehending what she is answering. Yeah, so I would ask, ask the teacher, like, can you give me a couple examples of like what she read and then what the question was, and how your daughter answered it. Because, yeah, those are those things that's like, I don't know, I have one picture in my head. I'm not sure that's what the teacher's talking about. So I would go ahead and ask for some samples, explanation, so you have a better idea. Great question. Okie dokie, folks. I'm going to get another drink of water. Oh, you know what I could do is give away a mug. I haven't given away a mug in a while. So this is my new swag. So on this side of the mug, it says the power of yet. And on this side of the mug, it says up until now. And up until now is my new favorite phrase. You know, when people say, oh, he can't do this, he can't do that. And I'm like, up until now, he hasn't shown us, da 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 da. So let's do my famous way of giveaways. I'm going to scroll through the comments with my eyes closed, and I will stop. And whoever made that comment is the winner of my new swag up until now. Okay, dokie. So I'm going to close my eyes. I'm scrolling up. I'm scrolling down through the comments all around, and I'm going to stop. So whose comment did I stop on? Kim! Yay, yay, yay! Kim. All right. Oh, yeah. She said, as an x-ray tech, I sing that often. The ankle bone's connected to the shin bone. I don't know. When joking around with patients, love to apply it to the IEP. Start your own TikTok. Yeah. Yeah. Kim, you and I. The new TikTok celebrities. So, Kim, I think I have your address. I will send you in one of these mugs and it will arrive at your doorstep. So, thank you so much for being here. I am really, really grateful for the connection that we can make virtually. And, you know, it is, I don't know, it's not as good as seeing everybody in person. However, I just love the intensity that you speak up when you speak up for your child. And I love how you share ideas with others because we're all in this together, right? It's about collaboration. So I'm indebted. I feel very grateful that you were out there doing what you're doing because you were making the world a better place. And it might sound trite, but you know what? It is the truth. It is the truth. You are making a difference. Keep going. Keep going. And we will see you in a couple weeks. So take care. And I'm going to try and remember to do my outro music.